Kenya's President William Ruto has committed to arranging a face-to-face meeting with Sudan's warring parties to end the conflict in that country. Fighting has been raging on since April between Sudan's army and the paramilitary group, with multiple US-Saudi brokered ceasefires being agreed on and broken. The conflict has reduced the capital Khartoum to an urban battlefield, with many districts of the city left without running water or electricity. Over 600 people have been killed and over 1 million displaced. Well, let's get an update on this story now, and we're joined by Executive Director for the African Division at Human Rights Watch, that's Mausi Segun. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly, in fact, both your first and surnames correctly. Let's start with the situation in the capital city. You have heard in that introduction, has it really been reduced to a battlefield?
Indeed, this situation in Khartoum is dire for the people who are still left there. There is food shortage, water shortage. Even before the fighting broke out, it had not been the best. Sudan was in the throes of real economic depression. And so for many of the civilians, the fight took them by surprise, and many did not have stores, to rely on. But the destruction that has followed the fighting from April 15 has left many people completely without support. And leaving the country has become the only option for many. But those who are able to leave are making the very tough decisions to leave either their aged parents back home, those who are unable to make the long treks to the borders or to other parts of the country. It's just been really, a horrible situation, and it's deteriorating by the day.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the plight of ordinary people in Sudan, people who are absolutely not aligned to neither side of these warring factions. How do they make their way out of the country? Because if the capital, Khartoum, has been reduced to a battlefield where there's no running water, no electricity, the airport surely does not function for people to either get into the country to provide much needed human aid or escape in order to protect their families. So through which borders do they leave this country in order for them to get to wherever it is that they would like to go?
So, I mean, as you probably know, Sudan is bordered by 8 different African countries. But many of those countries are just not accessible to people. So most of those who are fleeing have had to go, one, in the direction of Egypt, South Sudan, and Chad. Egypt, I think, as of today, is hosting around 200,000 people who have so far fled, and many more are making their ways. They are paying for transport. I mean, they're using everything they have. Many are making really long treks. There have been people who've been on the roads for 2 weeks over the last 50 days, carrying their children, managing with those who can work, and taking all that they are left with them. But on the way, through that journey, whether it's from Khartoum to Egypt or to Juba in South Sudan, or from the Darfur end into eastern Chad, people are reporting about attacks by those who have set up checkpoints. We don't know exactly who they are. Those people who have spoken to us don't know either. But sometimes it's people in uniform, it's people without uniform who strip them of the little they manage to escape their homes with. And then so they get to the border areas with barely nothing beyond the clothes on their back. So it's just really this harrowing experience that people complain of, not just from the fighting forces of the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudan military, but of ordinary militias, coming up, taking opportunity to attack, to vandalize, to loot, to carry out sexual violence against women and girls, to steal, basically, and strip people of whatever they have.
Sure. And as Human Rights Watch, yours is to concern yourself with the plight of human beings, particularly their safety. The neighboring countries that the people of Sudan go into, what is the state of refugee camps there that possibly are set up in order to receive the people who are fleeing the fighting in Sudan?
Unfortunately, we cannot even speak in terms of camps. There are no existing camps. So if you remember, I think, Egypt itself was already playing host to close to 5 million Sudanese people, both those who were living there doing legitimate business and others who had fled other situations before the April 15 fighting broke out. And so the 200,000 are just an addition, to that existing number. There is no facility in those.
My connection to the Human Rights Watch representative. All right, are you still there? I think we broke off a little bit. Please just...
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please pick up from the last point. Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, and then you have in South Sudan, South Sudan already has its own triggers. There is subnational level violence going on there, and now you have close to 90,000 people who have fled into South Sudan. There are no camps. There are no resources. The South Sudanese people themselves who are displaced internally were already in dire straits in terms of assistance, food, even water and everything. And then you look at, Chad on the other side of the country. Chad was already playing host to 400,000 Sudanese people who had fled the conflict in Sudan and the ongoing, violence in that region. And so you have an additional 90,000 people on top of that. There are no camps for them. People are living under trees. They are staying out in the open sun, eating whatever they can find, relying on the goodwill of the nationals, whether it's Chadians or South Sudanese or Egyptians. Basically, that's what they have, except for what the humanitarians are able to get in as quickly as they have. But they themselves, the humanitarian organizations, are struggling because the funds are just not coming in. And that's what needs to change.
The effort to try and end this war, that particular effort, my understanding is that South Sudan has tried to negotiate or to try and bring these two generals to a negotiating table. I don't think that has had an impact. Now, the Kenyan President, William Ruto, says he is going to do his best to try and bring them to the negotiating table. What, in your view, is going to bring about peace in Sudan?
From our point of view, there have been several efforts. There was the effort led by the United States government, working with Saudi Arabia to bring General Al-Burhan and Dagalo to Jeddah. Ultimately, the outcome is not what anyone, hoped for. The fighting continues as we speak. And then the Intergovernmental Authority, under whose auspices, that's IGAD, President Kiir of South Sudan attempted to intervene, has also not yielded efforts. Now, what President Ruto, Kenya's President Ruto, is saying is that this will be a new attempt, again, under the auspices of both IGAD and the African Union, to do the right thing to bring these warring generals together to end this. Yeah. But, from our point of view, what the international community needs to do immediately is to impose an arms embargo to stop those who are arming these warring partners from continuing to do so, because those who are suffering, as we said earlier, are ordinary civilians, Sudanese people, ordinary people who are living in Sudan, going about their businesses, other Africans, some of who are still trapped in Sudan, by the way. So there needs to be an arms embargo and then a clear message to both generals that there will be consequences for the violations and the abuses that are already happening, on top of, the situation that was existing in Darfur and the International Criminal Court indictments that are yet to be effected by Sudan. It needs to be clear that there will be consequences and that there will be accountability. And no one is going to get away with all that has happened to the ordinary people of Sudan.
Mausi Segun, let me thank you very much for your time. She is the Executive Director for the African Division at Human Rights Watch.